Sorry about that.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Carolyn Tracino, Director of Urban Wildlife Education and Communication for the Old Agora Homeowners Board, and Director of Poison Free Agora and co-founder of Cities Against Rat Poisons. Welcome to our 6th webinar and our first webinar of 2022. We've covered a variety of wildlife topics, and this is the first time we've covered snakes. We're excited to welcome our wonderful experts to share information on how we can identify snakes and coexist with them. Our presentation is 45 minutes and we'll reserve the last 15 minutes for questions. You can either use the chat or the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll address the questions at the end. Feel free to chat your questions in at any time. And this webinar is being recorded. I'll let John and Zeev and Sharon do their introductions, and we'll start off with Sharon.
Good evening. I'm Sharon Shingai. I'm the organizer or mama hen of the Herp Connection. Herpetology is the science of studying reptiles and amphibians. You might wonder how I got involved in herpetology. About 18 years ago, my son was bitten by the herping bug when he went out bird watching with his father. And ever since then, we've been very active in another organization of herpers. And I soon became the mama hen of that group and did a lot of the organizational work for the young junior herpers. And we took them out on a lot of field studies, field trips, and camping trips throughout the Southwest. And I started this organization to continue the work I was doing to help educate people about reptiles and amphibians and to promote their conservation. I joined a group called Save Chatsworth, and it's part of a family of organizations in the Chatsworth area who are primarily organized to acquiring and creating the Santa Susana State Historic Park and dedicated to the preservation of our open spaces. There are several organizations under that. Through that, I was able to continue my educational outreach. I coordinate the 3rd grade field trips into the Santa Susana State Historic Park. We also do classroom visits with our reptiles and amphibians. And we participate in various community events throughout the city of Los Angeles. We've been at the open house at Plaza Rita Natural Center, have participated in their rattlesnake awareness trainings. And we've also taken our herps to P22 Day in Griffith Park for several years. And we're the community organizers with the Santa Susana Mountain Park Association and Sky Valley volunteers to coordinate the Earth Day open house at the Chatsworth Nature Preserve, which is happening on the 23rd of April of this year. It's been 3 years since we've been able to do that. So we're really looking forward to a wonderful day. And I've sent Carolyn the flyer and hope all of you will join us there. We started Herp Connection initially to continue educating the public, especially our children, about the herps, the reptiles and amphibians that live in and around us. It is our way of making science come alive for the young people. All of a sudden, they're able to understand that a lot of the scientific words that they learn in school are not just for a science test, but actually to study science. We work closely with our legislators so we can continue doing our educational outreach and to help us conserve areas for our reptiles and amphibians. Teaching people how to coexist with our local reptiles and amphibians is one of the main things that our work involves. They were here first, and we continue to take more and more of their habitat away from them. One of the ways that we can help them is by the board lines that we have set up at the Chatsworth Nature Preserve, Chatsworth West, and soon we will have a new board line at the Santa Susana Field Lab. There we study the animals and record what we see, study the trends in their population, and how weather affects the number of herps we see. Upon request from the academic and professional herp community, we share this valuable information. We also respond to frantic calls from homeowners throughout the San Fernando Valley, up to Castaic and over to the Canyon Country area. We have helped people who call us from the Inland Empire to help them relocate their unwanted visitors. We are willing to train people to safely remove and relocate rattlesnakes. We are planning to provide magnets with the phone numbers of people in their communities who can relocate snakes, especially the rattlesnakes. We have a good working relationship with the herp professors in the leading colleges and universities in Southern California. Graduate students will contact us for information about where to find the reptiles or amphibians for their theses. We provide information about grant opportunities and fellowships for herp students and write letters of recommendations for them. We work closely with the U.S. Geological Survey by providing field data that they need. Venom researchers at Loma Linda University and people who produce anti-venom for dogs ask us to help in finding rattlesnakes from specific localities to milk their venom and then release them. Venom varies by locality, and these researchers are able to create more effective anti-venom. We invite the professional herpetologists and professors to our field studies as well. This collaboration has created close bonds between the professional academic community with the field herpers. And now 2 outstanding field herpers will share their knowledge with you. Without further ado, I turn this presentation over to these experts, John Lauermann and Zeev Nitzan Ginsburg.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. My name is John Lauermann, and I'm a field herpetologist. I live out in Santa Clarita. And just a real brief thing, I've been chasing reptiles around since I was a little kid. I got a renewed passion for it when I discovered citizen science and recording my data and sharing it with, as Sharon said, sharing it with other organizations. I found a big gap in what is known as a herpetologist. When I was younger, we didn't really understand a herpetologist is somebody that took zoology and went to college and got a degree. And we always assumed they knew a lot about reptiles. But what I found is there's a lot of knowledge lacking between the academic herpetologist and the field herpetologist. And what we're trying to do, as Sharon mentioned, and I'm trying to do, is bridge that gap, because we have a lot of information that they don't get because we're out in the field studying them all the time. We know where and how to find them, their behaviors, their patterns. So we can collect data. We can collect venom samples for Loma Linda. We do that. Different species, if they need for USGS, they're looking for instance, example, they're looking for glossy snake, California glossy snake samples of DNA so they can do research, and they reach out to the field herpetologist. And it's kind of given us a new purpose in working together and furthering our knowledge in both areas. So we learn from each other. So with that, I'll turn over to Zeev.
I'm Zeev. I'm also a field herpetologist. I grew up in India, which is where I got into herpetology, and was involved with the academic herpetology world there, field studies and research on new species in the Western Ghats, which is one of the most biodiverse areas in the world. And then since moving here about 10 years ago, I've kind of slowly gotten involved with herpetology here in California, most recently with John and Herp Connection. Also just for the same reasons as John, just to, I've always enjoyed going out, finding snakes. I'm a wildlife photographer. And so for me, it's going out to the field to see them, and now there's a purpose to it. And so that's really what is a passion for us and what we do. And so I think with that, we'll get started here on the presentation. We're going to go through a bunch of different topics. We're going to kind of introduce you guys to the snakes that we have here locally that you're likely or less likely to see. And then at the end, we'll talk more specifically about rattlesnakes and how you can live with them, some mitigation, what to do if you are bitten, all that stuff right at the end. So we're going to jump right in here. And let's see here. So this is just kind of already covered by Sharon and John, who we are. We're Herp Connection. It's a 501c. We work with academic and professional herpetologists. We relocate rattlesnakes, field studies, just all that stuff that kind of Sharon already talked about. And so getting right into our native species here. I'm going to start out with the king snake.
Yeah, that's our California king snake. Probably one of the most common snakes seen. They're a tremendous benefit because they eat everything. They eat everything that they can get their mouth around, from birds, from rodents, other snakes, rattlesnakes. They're immune to rattlesnake venom, so they do eat rattlesnakes, obviously smaller than themselves, and just about everything. So they're a great friend to have around. You don't want to mess around with king snakes. They're pretty hardy, and they seem to be doing fairly well living with humans, because one of the things I didn't mention is that up here we have a very interesting situation. We have a lot of people moving in, but because of the geography, they can't really get rid of the habitat for snakes. So the houses are scattered around these little micro habitats, and one of the things I'm studying is how well those snakes are holding on. And certain snakes aren't doing as well as others. The king snake's doing very well. So it's a real hardy snake and a real important one.
Definitely, yeah. And in different parts of the range, they're pretty variable. Here in our area, they're pretty standard. They're usually banded. In southern part of the state, they can be striped or other patterns, but here they're usually banded. They can be kind of black and white banded like this, or often in the valley, especially in Agora Hills, they're a little more yellowish like this, where dark brown and yellow, as opposed to just that jet black and white. You can get both.
That's a San Diego gopher snake. That is, again, probably the second most common snake you see, next to the Southern Pacific rattlesnake. It's one that's confused with rattlesnakes probably the most.
Yeah.
Their main diet is rodents. They are rodent feasters, and they get big. They can grow 6 feet. Not much over anymore.
They'll just eat as many as they can find. No break-ins. They'll just guzzle them down.
They find a nest of rodents. They will actually. But yeah, they'll actually go in and they'll take 4 or 5 or 6 and coil them all up at the same time down their whole body and hold on to them and eat them. I've seen them do that. It's pretty interesting.
They're pretty fierce hunters. They'll swallow them alive. They'll grab, if the rodent's small enough, they just grab them and eat them. So they're really beneficial to have around. And they're
a snake that sticks around, and they've been doing very well with humans.
Right.
They're a little bit hard. The droughts are a little harsher on them than what I'm finding with the king snakes.
Yeah, with certain species that are, especially the rodent specializers, rodents follow humans. Development as we go out, rodents follow, and so snakes that eat rodents do better than other snakes in that regard.
The California mountain king snake kind of broken down into some different subspecies and different species now. That's a whole DNA thing. We're not going to go into that. So right now they're all California mountain king snakes as far as I'm concerned. We call them Zanata because it's a little bit easier to say than California mountain king snake. So if the Latin name is shorter, we usually use that. So if we trip you up there, just buzz in and say, what are you talking about? These snakes are found in the higher elevations or along the coast. They're pretty much a rock dweller. They hang out in rocky outcrops and stay well hidden. They used to be considered rare, but we found out they're not really rare. They're just very secretive. There is a ban on collecting them in certain areas. They're protected species. Yeah, and that's because before they didn't understand that because they're secretive didn't mean that they're rare.
That's a great example of what we were talking about earlier. We're bridging the gap between field herpetology and academic herpetology. Academic herpetologists aren't necessarily great at going out and finding snakes, so they would go out and have a lot of trouble finding them. And so the kind of almost myth that they're rare came up. But once you know how to look for them, they can be common. They're not necessarily as common as rattlesnakes or
you can find 8 or 10 of them in the day in the right conditions.
You know where they are and what to look for. They're there. So one common myth we'll talk about myths about snakes in general and later, but something you'll hear a lot is about coral snakes. there's no coral snakes in California. If you see a red and black and white snake out in nature, it's a harmless mountain king snake. They just don't exist here in California.
There is no other venomous snakes that can harm a person in California except for rattlesnakes.
It's not a rattlesnake. It's not venomous here. Right.
That's one of our daytime hunters. That's the striped racer, or now they call it the chaparral whip snake. We call them California striped racers. Because that's kind of the subspecies of lateralis. If you look at the eyes on this, you can see they have like gun sights over the top of their eyes. They're daytime hunters. They get up, raise their head up off the ground. They actually use vision more than a lot of snakes do. They're looking for lizards. They eat other snakes. They eat rodents, anything they can get. Extremely fast, very hard to get your hands on. If you try to catch one, they're just elusive. The stripes are actually create an optical illusion. When you see the snake moving through the brush, you aren't actually seeing the snake, you're seeing where it was.
Right. It's like this optical, it's like when you're, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Like
like
they're gone, they're gone. You will see it kind of behind there.
they will also, they're probably one of the more intelligent snakes because they have been known to circle around and watch you look for them in vain. And I've had experience with that.
Yeah.
When I was a
They
kid.
kind of pick their head up above the ground there. I wish I had a picture. I didn't include in the presentation, but head on, where you can see, as compared to other snakes, their the head kind of narrows down to a point and the eyes stick out, so they can look straight down there.
Yeah, gun sights.
Right. Good eyesight, fast snake.
You know, they get about what 4 feet is average. Would be a big one.
Yeah,
Usually
3,
around
4
3,
feet,
3.5 feet. They can get up to 5 feet. But
Very common out in the trails. You might not see them because they'll be gone. You know, they'll see you before you see them. They'll be gone, but very common.
It's another one of our fast snakes. That's the coach whip, a red racer. That doesn't really look like a red racer too much because it's kind of colored. It can be really bright red. Their bellies can be real pinkish, and again, they're daytime hunters, much like the striped racer. They have the gun sight eyes, the big eyes you can see, and they're looking for daytime prey. One thing to note is that one of the things we discovered is that they've been known to feed on grasshoppers. Adults been known to feed on grasshoppers, which in one instance found
Especially when you have like the infestation when they come, you know, like the swarms. They'll go in and they'll just gorge them. Speaking of the red racer, look at actually right this color, like bright brick red. I didn't have any pictures
we
of
had
that,
another
but,
picture.
These are juveniles when they're young. They're brown, kind of patterns broken up, like that right here on the neck with some banding on the back of the head. When they're adults, often their head will turn black, or they'll have some black on the neck, and they'll get the rest of the body will be a brick red.
Yeah, we should have a better picture. We're sorry about that. And that's our yellow belly racer. Those have been found in the Santa Monica Mountains. So you have them, they're kind of spotty. We don't have them out here, but you do have them out there in Santa Monica Mountains, and they're in the Sierras. I've seen them there. They're smaller than their cousins over there. The eastern yellow belly racers are much bigger, but they have the same trait in yellow on the bottom and kind of an olive color on the top. And again, they eat mice, and they're daytime hunters as well.
Yeah, because we so rarely see them, this is kind of the best picture we have. And then olive gray kind of on the back, and the bellies range from like a sky blue to yellow, but most often like a yellow or a light greenish yellow. They're pretty elusive. You're not likely to see one, but you might. They're hiking up in the Santa Monica Mountains for sure.
It's a ringneck snake. It's a smaller snake. I forgot to get the sizes of these things too. It's like the yellow belly racer, 2 feet. You might see them.
Yeah.
The ringneck snakes can be 18 inches, 20 inches. There are species of ringneck snakes that are east of here, like the regal ringneck, to get much bigger, but these ringnecks stay fairly small, probably 14, 16 inches long.
Yeah, about a foot is common. We'll see them about a foot long and very thin, so they look even smaller.
They're small. And the ring on this one is not really defined, but usually have a very bright ring on their neck, and their underbellies.
So when you catch them, often when you'll turn over a rock in your yard or something and you'll be one under, they'll often flip over and present their belly, which is a bright red or orange like this. Sometimes they'll coil up their tail in a corkscrew. And yeah, super bright, super colorful.
And the ring's usually that bright too.
Yeah, the ring around the neck usually is like this, like one of these scales just around here. This is a little bit of a dull colored one, but they can be like this too.
They feed on insects, worms, things like that.
Yeah, anything they can get their hand on that's small, they're just small enough.
You find them, they're moist snakes. They like things when it's moist earlier in the season. undercover is usually find
Yeah,
them.
after rain in your yard, you might see one under a rock or something.
This is a black-headed snake. This is a real secretive snake. You probably won't see this too often. Every once in a while, somebody out here says,
Pops
"What
up,
is
yeah.
that?" They don't know what it is, but that's a very common snake, but it stays hidden very well. And it's a mildly venomous snake. Again, it eats insects and um,
These are actually centipede, spider, and scorpion eaters in the
Yeah.
desert where they are.
invertebrates and
Yeah,
things like
they're,
that.
they're also very small, about the same size as the ringnecks. The ringnecks also are mildly venomous, as John mentioned. So they have a venom that affects their prey, but it's completely harmless to humans.
So these are known too as a rear fang snake.
Right.
That's the difference. They couldn't even see because they're so small.
Right.
But also they're nocturnal. You're not going to really see those anyway. And that's the blind snake. We do okay. We'll speed this up a little bit.
Yeah.
That's our thread snake. We call them the blind snakes. You don't see those very often. They stay way undercover. Termite eaters, and again, we can't even search for them. They just
Right.
pop up.
They pop up when they pop up. Often mistaken for worms. You can tell right away they're not by the scales. And if you look at a close up of the head like this, you can see it has little eyes underneath the scales there.
Vestiges of eyes. They don't
Yeah,
really-
they can't really see. They can see light and dark. They can't really see any images.
That's our two-striped garter snake. It's an endangered species.
Yeah, another protected species.
It likes to live around wet water areas. Sometimes it can be where water was present. They're still there, but if it gets too dry, they'll disappear.
Yeah.
They're pretty much aquatic. They like to swim around and they eat frogs and amphibians and things. And they'll take mice too, I guess.
Yeah, these can definitely be seen in the Santa Monica Mountains. There's a lot of canyons that have water in them that you can find. They're still secretive. You got to hike in there to see them, but
And they're
They're there.
a couple feet long, 2.5
Yeah.
feet long max. That's our patch nose snake, another daytime hunter. It likes to root out. Look at the nose on it. Pull that patch nose on that because it roots out lizards and things during the day. Lizards are underground. They're hiding underground. They'll dig out. They're very fast as well. And doing studies on the patch nose right now as well because
Yeah.
they're disappearing quick.
this is another right. This is another protected species here.
But they're out there. You will see them occasionally. They're little night snakes. They're always confused as gopher snakes and people don't know. But you can look at the eyes and see they're designed for nighttime. They're completely nocturnal. If you find them in the day, it's when you're flipping things over and looking for them, then you might find them. But for the most part, to see them on the crawl, you'll have to see them on the dirt and desert roads,
Yeah.
asphalt roads. They're moving around. They again are rear fang too, and they're very small.
Yeah. Another snake that eats scorpions, centipedes, spiders.
That's another rear fang snake. That's the lyre snake. Its venom can't harm you. They get a little bigger. They can be up to 4 feet, but usually they're about 2.5, 3 feet long. Nocturnal snake lives in crevices of big boulders, and they're bat eaters is one of the things that they seek out.
Lizards and bats. They
Lizard,
specialize
bats,
in.
rodents, other snakes, and even other.
Yeah.
I've seen in cases where they've eaten their
Absolutely,
own
yeah.
species.
Here's a little close up of the head. One thing I want to mention briefly, one thing you hear often, and again, we'll talk most about myths about snakes at the end, was that you can tell a venomous snake or a harmful snake from a harmless snake by the pupil shape, which first of all, if you're close enough to see the pupil shape of a snake, and it is a dangerous snake, you're probably far too close. But as you can see here, it has a slit pupil. They say if it has a slit pupil or cat-like pupil, it's dangerous. And if it has a round pupil, it's not.
No, that's
Absolutely a myth. In different lights, rattlesnakes' pupils can be round. Lots of harmless snakes that have slits. As I keep going through, I want to mention something. We keep saying, rear fanged or mildly venomous. Earlier, we said the only venomous snake is the rattlesnake. What we meant by that is the only dangerously venomous snake. Because they're venomous, they can't harm humans. Lyre snakes come the closest, and even then, the worst reaction you get is some localized swelling from a bite, completely harmless to humans.
the rosy boa. That's one of the all-time pet favorites. Trade. Again, those were once to be thought very rare. Now they've turned out they're very common if you know how to find them. They're a rock dweller. You find them in any kind of rocky situations where there's places they can get into crevices and down deep into the ground in rocky areas. It doesn't have to be rocky on the surface. There's rock underground. That's where they live. They eat rodents for the most part. They're rodent eaters. They can take lizards when they're young.
Right.
Mostly rodents.
Again, you can see here the slit eyes. These are the most harmless snakes that exist out there.
Slow moving and mostly nocturnal. Another nocturnal snake is the long-nosed snake. It's another tricolored snake. They're highly variable. Sometimes they're known as a claris phase, where it's just black and white, and they can be confused with a California king snake. They're related to the California king snake, distant cousins. Again, they're harmless, and
Yeah.
people
Cool.
think they're coral snakes, or they see a mountain king snake. More
Right.
likely, it's a long-nosed snake, and if you see one, it's usually at night. They're nocturnal lizards and rodents and things like that. They get them at about 2-3 feet.
Everything, yeah.
And that's the glossy snake. Out here, the coast glossy snake is the California glossy snake is protected. We're doing studies on that right now. We're trying to do some DNA work on them and see what's going on with them. I know that I was doing collecting some samples out. What do you want to call that arrow area up there? Like
Western Mojave Desert.
yeah, like the very end of the Mojave Desert. If you look on a map, it kind of comes to a point up towards Foreman, if you know where that is, up that way. And then you get out to the
Lake County.
yeah, you look out there in the desert, and they start looking different. They look like they could be intergrades out there. And unfortunately, the wind farms that they're putting up there is pretty
It's
much
wiping that
devastating the
habitat, yeah.
population out there. It's really tearing up the population. There's some diverse stuff that we need to study out there.
The biggest threat to snakes by far is development. And actually, an interesting study came out specifically about glossy snakes, because they've been disappearing like crazy, and they've been disappearing faster than development has been keeping up. An interesting study that came out recently is actually that light pollution is what's killing these guys off. They want like really, really dark habitat at night, and that in areas like fringes around cities where they can still hang on, the habitats are okay. The actual light pollution is itself, it's not letting them hunt. And when they do come out, they're more easy to be picked off by predators, and they just don't do well. And so they're disappearing at a really fast rate. Another one, a friend of mine actually found one in the LA basin recently, and it was the first one that's been found in the LA basin since 1937. So that's just giving an idea of how rare they are in LA.
Very common in the desert. One of the most common snakes.
The different subspecies in the desert, and there you basically can't go out to the desert without seeing it. Anyways, now we get to the last snake we want to talk about, which is
The most common snake.
yeah,
Southern Pacific rattlesnake. If you can live with them, it's better to live with them than try to get rid of them, because they eat more rodents and do more rodent control than most any other snake. Perhaps
or any other animal.
maybe
They're
look
just-
at gopher
yeah.
snakes too, but yeah, they can devour rabbits when they're adults. They're huge. They're heavy-bodied snakes. They're slow-moving. You can walk backwards faster than they can move. There's an
Big one,
adult.
yeah.
And they're highly variable as well. They come from everything from green. Some people think they're Mojave greens because you see green Southern Pacific. They can be black like this one. They can be almost white. I have some that are blonde colored. You know,
Maybe
they just
super high contrast like
yeah,
this,
they're just highly variable.
or red or pink. Like
But they have some different characteristics that will show you we get along that should differ from gopher snakes, so you can see what the difference is. Their venom is highly toxic. It's highly variable. It's a hemotoxic venom, which means it's the principle behind their venom is to digest the prey before it dies. So nature has made this venom that will envenomate a prey item like a mouse. It will run away. As it's running away, it's dying and being digested. I know it sounds kind of rough, but that's what it does.
Right.
And leaves a pheromone
digested
trail.
from within, yeah.
Yeah, and the pheromone trail for the snake to track it back down. I've seen like a mouse run out of the road and die, and then a hill rider, that's the Latin name, they come out and eat it, and it's much more readily available, the nutrients, because it's already half digested. So if you get bitten by one, the last thing you want to do is put a tourniquet on, because you're actually putting something that's wanting to digest your arm.
Yeah, we'll get more into detail
Yeah.
about all of that right at the end. But they're, babies are often light colored and super high contrast. There's lots of blotches, whereas as adults, they often tend to fade out. Not always, but they tend to fade out and get more unicolored. Not necessarily always black, but
That's a really dark one.
that's a really dark one. Here in Santa Clarita, I've seen a lot of darker ones. Usually in the hills, I've seen darker ones, and down lower high contrast ones, but it's not, they can be variable anywhere. Like this is a full grown adult too, and it's still super high contrast. We're going to run through real quick just the lizards here. We're not going to talk too much about them. Just the alligator lizards, which are super common in your yards. You'll probably see them. You'll see them hunting. Around this time of year, you can see them mating. Actually, it look like they're fighting. You'll see the male bite onto the female behind the neck like this, and they'll start, thrashing about. Another example of citizen science helping academia is the curator of the Natural History Museum, Greg Pauly, who help out often with data, has been researching this for years. And so there's actually an app he's created, which you can see at the Natural History Museum, email address, phone number you can text pictures to. He collects all sightings of mating alligator lizards, which is kind of cool. And it's a way for him to track them without him have to get out there and see each observation himself.
And a quick note on those is the males have big, giant spade heads.
Yeah, so these are both, this is the male, you can see,
Yeah.
you can see here as the neck goes up, kind of big bulging cheeks here. The last one is a male as well, but you can't really see it from this angle, but it's big bulging like pit bull cheeks almost.
Yeah, they're
because of the
huge.
male.
The females are more slender necked.
Yeah. The fence lizard, you guys have seen these 100 times. Anytime you go out, sitting on a fence, sitting on a rock, these are what you're going to see.
Second most common lizard.
It's everywhere. Probably.
That's the most common.
Yeah, the most common lizard. These are, usually if you'll see something up on a rock, up on a fence, it'll be a fence lizard, and down kind of at the edge of a bush and, you know, scampers away as you come closer on a curve or something. It's one of these usually.
That's a sidewalk lizard.
Named for the block trail on the side. Very inventively named.
It's our western skink.
Very active this time of year. You flip something over, you move something in your yard, you'll see just a dash of gold and blue kind of disappearing.
They're fast.
Yeah, they have these blue tails as juveniles, and they kind of grow out of it as they become adults. This
There's
is
a whiptail. That's
even faster, yeah.
Yeah, those are going to be always moving. They're just a blur.
You'll see them if you happen to see them. If you happen to see them before they see you, you'll see them kind of running here, kind of fast, moving around.
Yeah,
Looking
they
for
don't
something.
stand still long.
And then the moment they see you, they're just gone. Yeah, super, super fast lizards.
That's our little legless lizards that we have, protected species, and they're breaking those all down into all kinds of different subspecies.
These are actually super common too, but very rarely seen. They spend most of their life underground. And yeah, they're no legs. It's a lizard.
Eyes.
They have eyelids. They have ear
That's the
holes.
difference,
Right.
for the most part. They have ears. They have eyelids. That's one of the main differences between snakes. There are a few exceptions, but
Yeah.
that's basically the difference. Horned lizards, which are disappearing, are coast horned lizards.
Yeah.
You can tell by the double fringe on the side. That's a coast.
Yeah, we have-
desert have a single fringe.
Two subspecies of horned lizards you might see in LA County. There's desert horned lizard, which kind of ranges in from the desert, and most of it's the coast horned lizard. And the coast has these two. I don't know if you can see here. There's one line of spines here, and then a second one underneath, whereas the desert one only has one rather
And
than
the
two.
even horns too. They
Right.
have that two big horns.
Let me see here. Go closer up of its head. These are also endangered and protected species. The ones here in by the coastal horned lizard, which is this one.
Yeah, but real quick on the horned lizards, everybody wanted to keep this when we were kids. We keep them. We didn't know that they have a very specific diet. They need harvester ants. They need the harvester ants to survive. Without them, they disappear.
Yeah,
There's a certain
it's
enzyme
really
in
hard
there.
to get them to eat other ants or crickets or other things.
They'll eat
Even
it.
sometimes you can
They'll
get them to eat
die.
it, but yeah, the nutrients they need aren't in them, and so they don't do well in captivity at all. And yeah, development has just knocked this species out. So some of the benefits of snakes we want to kind of talk about. We'll get into kind of the meat of recognizing rattlesnakes and rattlesnakes, just in general terms. We kind of touched on it in the beginning, but the number one benefit of snakes is that they're rodent eaters. You know, rodents cause millions of dollars of damage across the country every year in eating, whether it's eating crops, architectural damage, structural damage, all kinds of stuff. Not only that, but here disease carriers, ticks that can carry Lyme disease and hitch rides and rodents. Here in Southern California, not just rodents, well, I guess they're rodents, but the ground squirrels and the gophers, you know, get under get under your houses, get in the foundations. It can really be a problem.
Even rabbits.
Yeah, and rabbits will go through your garden and just eat all of your ornamental plants and everything. And just in a couple of days, a rabbit can absolutely destroy your garden. And so snakes really keep their population down in areas where snakes have been not eradicated. It's hard to eradicate snakes, but the snake population has gone down and the rodent population has gone up. You really see the effect of that. Living in India, there was I won't get into the details of it, but there was an area where they really had snakes. And then a fire came through and burnt it. And we didn't have snakes in that area of the village for a long time. And this was a study done. And they had the next few years after that, the rodent population just exploded. You'd open the door to your sheds and there'd be 50 to 100 rodents just flying. It's crazy how fast rodents breed and how fast their population can just spiral out of control.
Part of the system, you know, works all the way up from the plant life all the way to the top.
Yeah.
There's a whole-
It's a carefully balanced ecosystem. And when you pull one thing out of it, everything else collapses from the top to the bottom. And speaking of the food chain, another benefit of the snakes is they're part of that food chain, you know, as prey and as predators for themselves. Other endangered species, right? Endangered species or species of concern like roadrunners, owls, fox, wildcats. They all eat snakes, and so for a lot of them, it's a big part of their diet, and they just kind of help maintain that level that you need of each species. And then some snakes not only eat pests like rodents, but eat other rattlesnakes. Like we said, king snakes will eat rattlesnakes, racers, coach whips, they'll eat rattlesnakes. And those kind of little semi-venomous snakes, we're talking about the ringnecks, the black-headed, they'll eat spiders, they'll eat insects, they'll eat centipedes. So it's just good to have them around for that aspect. And then venom from rattlesnakes is being used in all kinds of research and medicine. I have it up on the screen. I won't read that word for word. You just kind of see that. But it's being used in medication across the world. And right, in blood thinners, and it's being used in research for other things too, for dogs, for humans, for I think there's horse medicine that's coming out now that has snake venom in it. There's a pretty experimental study being done right now on a possible cancer treatment with using snake venom. So it's really, really a great tool to have. And then kind of getting into more specifically about rattlesnakes and living with the snakes that they're most often confused with are gopher snakes. But they are kind of whatever we'll say about gopher snakes versus rattlesnakes applies to other snakes versus rattlesnakes too, for the most part. But in general, most common call that we'll get, hey, I have a rattlesnake, they'll send a picture, it turns out to be a gopher snake for the most part. And so you can see here, this one's lighter, the gopher snake's a little bit darker. It's absolutely can be switched the other way around where this will be lighter and this is darker. That's not, they're, like we said, they're super variable for both of them.
The main thing is that the rattlesnake is heavy bodied and the gopher snake isn't.
So kind of looking at that, I have it outlined here. You can see the head of the rattlesnake, a little more angular, a little more triangular. You got these cheeks here where the venom glands live, right here and right here. You'll see if you come down the neck, it really sticks out from there. Whereas on the gopher snake here, the head is pretty much even. I mean, it bulges out a little bit the neck, but it's much even, and it's a nice long head, long, smooth head. One thing to note is when a gopher snake and many other snakes are disturbed or threatened, they'll flatten their head down to kind of look more like that, but it's very obvious that they're flattening it. You'll see the head kind of widen out and they'll kind of push down. It doesn't look like that, just how they are. Whereas a rattlesnake will always look like that. And then if you look at their tail as well, non-venomous snakes like gopher snakes, racers, whatever it is you see around, have long, thin, tapered tail, where the rattlesnake, it'll have a rattle on it, but often they can lose their rattles. The rattles are just dead skin. And I actually rescued a rattlesnake 2-3 days ago that had been in an altercation with a ground squirrel or a dog, I don't know what, and had lost all of its rattle. And so when it does that, there's still no taper. The tail will come right here and then just end here. So it'll still be a blunt, rounded tail.
And unless it's a snake that's been injured, sometime once in a great while, a gopher snake or snake gets the tail bit off and heals and it's blunt.
Right. At which point, look at the other distinguishing features. But in general,
once you see a rattlesnake once or twice, you'll know.
Yeah, blunt tails versus long tails, and that's kind of the two most reliable. If you don't want to learn, and it's pretty easy to learn patterns. Like you said, you see a couple of them, you're kind of gonna know the difference between them. But if you just want quick diagnosing, what's what, those two are kind of ways you can kind of tell between them. Just a couple more. Just gopher snakes, you see their variability, darker, lighter. Same thing with the rattlesnakes, just kind of all over, These are all the same species of rattlesnake. You could have a clutch of rattlesnakes being born that, one of these could all be from the same clutch. They could all look, there's no rule on how they're going to look.
We only have one species of rattlesnake that lives out where we're in the Agora is the southern Pacific rattlesnake. There's nothing else even close.
Yeah, when you get out of the desert, you get other species, but nothing else right
now. North, they become northern Pacifics, but they're very similar too, and it's just southern Pacifics, and the venom is very toxic. There's nothing to mess around with.
One of the bad ones. One of the interesting things about rattlesnake venom with southern Pacific rattlesnakes is their venom actually varies depending on what habitat they're in, what their prey is. But no matter where they are, the venom is highly toxic and dangerous. This is definitely, if you get bitten by one of them, I'll talk about we're going to talk about what to do if you do get bitten, but get to a hospital. That's the answer. Get to an ER.
Yeah, that's pretty much. Don't do anything. Don't try to put a tourniquet on or anything. Right to the hospital.
For some of the myths we want to touch on, we're going to kind of rush through them. But
the biggest one we'll talk about is the babies are more dangerous than adults. It's probably the most common myth that's out there.
Yeah,
It's
I
not-
used to believe it too. I mean, you just hear it so much, it's so drilled into
Yeah,
you. I thought I
you
used to
hear it
tell
so many
people,
times, people just take it as fact. And the
Right.
truth is that babies, the toxicity, when I speak about specifically Southern Pacific rattlesnakes,
drop for drop.
drop for drop, babies are 2 times as potent as adults. That said, because of the type of prey babies hunt, that they evolve into a different venom as adults. The adult has about 10 times the amount of venom in its venom gland. It can inflict a much more serious bite.
Right. The venom of a baby is more toxic, but they inject so much less into the bite. The danger of a bite really depends on how much venom you get, not the toxicity of venom, to an extent, of course. And an adult rattlesnake can pump in so much more venom than a baby.
Now, the myth is that babies can't control their venom,
Right.
which is not true, because if that was true, every time it bit the first thing it bit, it would inject all its venom and you have no venom and have to replenish it. And who knows when it would get an opportunity to find a meal again. So
Right.
it doesn't work that way.
Right. It just
They're
wouldn't make
more
any sense for them. Yeah,
able to control it.
it wouldn't make any sense for them to evolve and not be able to control their venom. Venom production takes a lot of energy, like from their prey. If they had to create all that venom again every time they eat, then all the energy from the meal would just go to creating more venom. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work that way. And venom is used it's only used in defense as a last measure. They don't really want to get all the venom into a human or a dog. Most of the time, they just want to give you a dry bite, a little bit of venom, and if you really harass them, or a dog harasses them, then they're going to get a big bite.
Right.
And a lot of venom.
These other ones, I just kind of let you guys read them. The rattlesnakes breed with other snakes. It's impossible. Separate species, different species in the world, completely different species can't breed. I mean, it just doesn't work. Biggest one is that, and you'll hear people back this up with stories from their own life, is that rattlesnakes chase them or they're super aggressive. It doesn't happen. We've seen between us, between our friends, between the community of herpetologists, thousands and thousands of rattlesnakes. We've never been chased by one, and we're the ones who would be chased by them because we're out there bothering them. So they don't. They will defend themselves. Often what people perceive as aggression is just being defensive. From their point of view, any interaction with them, you're the aggressor. You've shown up in their habitat, what they perceive to be their habitat, and you're a potential threat to them. So they will defend themselves, but they're never going to start something. They're never going to come at you aggressively.
They move toward you, but it's just because they're not smart.
Right.
And then if they do, to their perspective, there's this large thing getting closer and closer.
Right, because they're coming to you, but you're getting
more.
right. They also have really poor eyesight. Often, if you're out in bright sun, you're dark. You almost look like shade. They're going to move towards you. You possibly, or try to get behind you if they're against something.
Yes.
They're not chasing you. You give them space. You back away. You let them do their thing. You'll be fine. Right. So what to do if someone is bitten by a rattlesnake? And again, if you give them space and respect, it probably won't happen. If you're not trying to kill them, you're not trying to harass them, you won't get bitten. If you do get bitten, call 911 right away. There is nothing, get them, or if you have someone with you, drive you right to the ER, get to the thing. These other things are also very important. Take off any constricting clothes, any jewelry, bracelets, anything like that, because your hands are going to start swelling. Like John said, the venom of these rattlesnakes is hemotoxic. It affects your blood cells, and you're going to start to swell up right away. You want to mark your swelling so that at the hospital they can track the speed of the swelling.
If you can do that,
Right. If you have someone with you.
Nothing takes precedence over the should I get the Benadryl? Should I get
Nothing. None of that
If you
works.
have an EpiPen on you while you're on the way to the hospital, sure, you can use that, but it is not something you want to go and spend time.
And that might help with the swelling and stuff, but it's not going to help
No.
with the venom. You want to get venom. Don't apply tourniquet, like John said. What's going to restrict the venom to a smaller part of your thing, and it's just you're going to start to necrosis.
Probably lose your arm.
Right. By the time you get to the hospital, the venom has been concentrated here and has worked on here so much. They're going to have to amputate. If you cut it, it's you hear people say cut.
Really reduced a small.
Such a small. It's not going to do anything. One thing I wanted to mention is I have here. What's that?
The old
snake bite kits. Yeah.
You're older, you remember those? Everybody used to carry them. They're garbage.
They're still for sale online. You can buy them. They it's like these things that attach and cut your skin and sucks it. It doesn't do anything.
No.
One thing I wanted to mention real quick is it's an app called Snakebite 911. You can get it on the App Store or the Google Play Store, depending on what you're using. It looks like this. I don't know if you guys can see it on the screen. Probably not, but look it up. It'll go through. It'll ask you, what region you are. It'll show you all the rattlesnakes there with different photos. You can help ID it. There's tools on it for you before you get to the hospital. There's tools on it for EMTs if they pick you up. And there's tools on it for the doctors who might not have experience with administering antivenom, because a lot of doctors don't, they learn about it in medical school, but they might not have experience with it in real life. So you can go here, you go first aid, and I don't know if you can see it, kind of there. You choose whether you're a patient, an EMT, or a doctor, and it'll give you steps. Let's say if I'm a medical professional, it'll give you the steps here to go through an envenomation, how to treat it. So that's a great app to use. It'll also show you hospitals near you that have CroFab. There's two kinds of antivenom. It'll show you only one of them, but it's still a great app. And then the last one is this Facebook group, the National Snakebite Support. It's run by probably the leading toxicology scientists and ER doctors that specialize in snake envenomations in the country. I'm a member of it. I read the posts there. You're not a ton of great information to know ahead of time. Also, if you do ever get bitten, post there right away, and within minutes, some of the best toxicology ER doctors in the country will respond and help contact the hospital you're in to kind of get them, make sure that they're treating you the way they should be as far as your treatments. Yeah. Then if you do see a rattlesnake, which very likely might happen, we've moved out into their habitat. They'll move through our yard. They will happen. Kind of like we said before, keep your distance, give them space. Most times they're just moving through. They're basking in the sun. They're looking for prey. They're not there to take over your house. They're coming through. And if you leave them alone, most time by the end of the day, they're going to be gone. Sometimes they'll stay a day or two.
If it's really warm, like if they come out in the morning, it's a nice morning for them, 75 degrees to them is nice. They might moving around, all of a sudden it gets to be 85, 90. They may not have a place to get shelter. So what they'll do is they'll look for shaded areas where there's water, water lines, sprinkler lines, any kind of hose lines. They'll look for that because that's cooler, and they'll stay right there. They'll coil up. They're ambush predators. They're used to staying still.
Right.
So they'll sit there, but if you leave them alone, when it turns dark and cool, they're going to move off to where they can hunt.
If you have a large yard and they're out in the corner of it and they're not bothering you, they're not in your way,
leave them alone.
They'll be gone. They've been there for decades before. They'll be there for decades after. You'll probably never see the snake ever.
Yeah, it got trapped there because of the heat. They're going to move off. Many of the calls we get is, it's up against the garage. Well, it's not going to stay there, or it's up against the hose line.
Right. It didn't take up residence there. It's just where it is now. If you do have any pets, pull them inside. Just so you know, dogs often like to antagonize snakes, and dogs will often get bitten on the snout because they're nosing around at them, kind of barking at them.
Yeah. By the way, the best thing you can do for your dog is not the venom, the vaccines that the vets get. They're useless. No, they're useless for Hill or eye venom.
Right.
We're okay on simplistic venom like a Western Diamondback, which we don't have.
Right.
But for Pacific, they're useless. They're best, and it is now been studied and proven that the best thing that you can do for your dog is aversion training. Right.
There's aversion classes. You can find them online. If you're in the Santa Clarita area, we're running one in May this year.
We one every year out here for very inexpensive, and it's the best defense for your dog.
Right. It trains them not to go anywhere near
not
it.
to warn you. It trains them not to go near the
rattlesnakes. After they've been through this class, you can't drag them through rattlesnake.
95% of the dogs get it right out of the gate. They don't.
Now, if it is in your way, it's on your front porch, it's by your door or something. The best way I recommend is to just try to get it to move on its own. If you have a garden hose or something, you can spray it. They don't like that. They'll start moving. If you have something with a long handle, a rake, a hoe or something, you can start to push it on. This is what we use.
This one's an old one with this.
Right. The newer ones, usually this is a little bit wider to, minimize the pressure on the snake, and the top is rubber coated.
This has to be very careful. This old style, you have to know what you're doing to use this.
But these are super cheap online. You can get them for 40, 50 bucks. You can get a decent one. You just go to tongs.com. You can't see it on there, but tongs.com, which is super easy to remember.
It's easy. Pick them up, put them in the bucket.
Yeah, if you want to put it in a bucket, call a relocator. We'll come get it. Otherwise, pick it up, take it to the edge of your yard, drop it off. You'll never see it again.
I advise anybody who lives with snakes in their area to have a pair of tongs in a bucket in your garage.
Yeah, I think the heart of what we're trying to get across is they're not very scary. There's no reason to be scared of them. They'll move on their own. If you have to nudge them to move on, they will.
People always say, that's it. When I pick one up, they're just like, that's it. It's so anticlimactic. It's like, ding, ding.
The snake just sits there. We pick it up, plug in the bucket, and they're like, really? You drove up over there for 30 seconds.
Okay, in the bucket. Okay.
To keep snakes out of your yard, there's no foolproof method. Snakes are going to move where they want to go.
Fences don't work.
You can lower the chances of them coming in by keeping your yard clean. Snakes like to hide under things, wood piles, big tarps laid out with stuff on them, trash, thick shrubbery, yeah, any kind of stuff like that that they can take shelter in or that might attract rodents to hide in. They're going to come in and look for them. You want to keep your yard clean from that. You don't want standing water. You know, ponds are beautiful, but they attract all kinds of wildlife, especially going through the summer like we are. They're going to attract prey, which will attract snakes, but also snakes are looking for water as well when it's hot. And any kind of food source. So fruit trees, fruits falling down into the yard, are going to attract squirrels, it's going to attract rabbits, rodents, whatever. That again, anytime there's prey, there's going to be snakes. Right.
A lot of this fencing people put up isn't really very effective because even if they starts out effective, they start to buckle underneath. The snakes will find any opening they can get through if they want to come through. Right. So the trick is if you live in an area where there's a lot of wildlife, is just to learn how to live with them rather than trying to always get rid of wildlife. It never ceases to amaze me of people trying to kill off the wildlife. And so why did you move to an area right on the fringe of the forest? Why,
you want to be on the edge of nature, but you don't want to see any of the nature.
Yeah, so you want to kill nature off, but you don't want to live with it. Why don't you would think you would move to the middle of the city where there's not very much stuff going on except a few pigeons.
Right.
But out here I look at it like we're very fortunate to live with it. And your kids get to see this stuff, and it's it's better to learn to live with nature.
I think to add on to what John said, they're gonna, if they want to come through your yard, they're gonna come through your yard. By doing some of those things, you can make it less attractive for them to stay in your yard. Right. They'll move through and go through your yard, but they won't stick around. So are some of the other options that people use, like John said, snake fencing doesn't really work. Glue traps are awful. They're incredibly inhumane. They don't discriminate. They catch anything that moves on it. Things will die a slow, painful death on glue traps.
I can't believe the snakes we've taken out of the glue traps. It's horrible.
Yeah, and they're, they get stuck on, so then they thrash about, more of their body gets stuck, they're in an pollution, but it'll catch, birds, mice, it'll catch everything.
Little king snakes and stuff, just harmless snakes. I mean, we use like oil, baby oils, things like that to get them unstuck, but it's very,
it takes a long time. And
we can save them if we get them alive, but a lot of times just all kinds of dead, insects and everything stuck with them on there. So glue traps, we're talking anti-poisons for, this group. To me, that's just as toxic as any poison you can put out.
Yeah, glue traps as bad. It'll kill things the same way that poison does. A lot of people use netting around their vegetable garden.
Horrible.
I cannot say how many times we've had to cut dead snakes and dead lizards, dead mice, and squirrels out of the vegetable netting.
Once they get in that netting, they start to try to get out, and they just get more entangled, and then they start getting twisted in it, and the netting literally cuts into their bodies and cuts them up so badly that they die.
If you look at the way snakes are built, the scales are overlapping, so they can go in, but once they're in, they can't back out. And it's usually out in the sun. I was called to rescue a snake recently, and it was a snake that had been stuck in netting, and it was dead. It had been out there in the sun for a day or two, and had just dehydrated and died. And as I was cutting it out, I realized, I pointed out to the homeowner, there was 7 other snakes of varying death from skeleton to fresh in that netting, dead over the years, that they just never noticed. And so it's just this graveyard. And so they just asked me if I could take the whole netting. We just cut everything out.
If I go there and remove a snake from the netting comes with me. I cut a big hole in it because it's just horrible.
The death trap. Snake repellent they sell, it doesn't work. None of that works. It's all just a scam. Get your money.
Yep. Home Depot sells that stuff. No.
The bottom line is, there is no way to prevent snakes from getting into your yard. The only thing you can do is stop them from wanting to stay. That's what it is. That's pretty much kind of comes to the end of what we have to present to you guys. And we're pretty eager to get to your questions at this point.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was so informative. And let's see what type of questions we have. One is, after the snake's venom is drained, how long does it take for them to recover their venom load?
Well, it depends. It depends on the snake, the size of the snake. It depends on how much venom they expend in the bite. I don't think it's been studied in detail. But from preliminary studies I've read studies that have studied other things but have kind of touched upon it, I believe adult snakes have an easier time of replenishing their venom. Because again, venom production, it's a chemical process and it just takes energy, and they have more of it to produce,
They'll never get rid of all their.
no, they'll never be
Oh.
empty. I mean, snake milking for anti-venom and stuff. They'll milk and it'll get smaller and smaller and smaller, but there'll always still be venom coming out. So they'll always have some. It's very hard to completely empty out.
The other interesting thing to note too is that most people believe you have two fangs, right?
We can barely hear you on that.
Oh, how about now? Is that better?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We're going to say the belief that the two fangs, snakes always have a reserve set of fangs and a reserve and a reserve. So sometimes there's three fang marks. One breaks off, one pops right back into place. So there are always fangs ready to go. Venom's always ready to go. It never really runs out unless you're milking them dry. So that in the wild, they're always going to have venom.
Yeah. So I guess the answer is it depends. I don't have a concrete answer on that.
And is there a time of day or time of year that you should be more vigilant?
Right now. Pretty much, winter. We were talking kind of earlier with Carolyn before we started the presentation that the snake season for rattlesnakes is extended throughout the year. Now we have warmer winters and they come out. But that being said, they're most active early spring into summer. We're getting inundated with calls for rattlesnakes right now. As far as time of day, they're active. It depends more on temperature.
Temperature, if it's mild, tepid temperatures, like anywhere from 70 to 65 to 75 degrees, 80 degrees, they can be active and crawling.
Whether
Once
it's
it
night
gets-
or day.
Whether it's night or day, they when it gets too hot, they become nocturnal. Rattlesnakes become nocturnal.
Very often you'll see them in afternoons and evenings, but it's not because they're active in the afternoon and evening. It's because it's that temperature range during the afternoon and evening.
I was saying that to become surface active, 45 degrees and above is the low temperature is what really drives them to come out of brumation, which is a form of hibernation. They come out of brumation at around 45 degrees and stay active on the surface.
When the
those
nighttime lows are at 45 or
When it
so.
gets back into the 30s and low 40s, they set back down underground. That's too cold to digest prey, so they don't stay on the surface. They may come out briefly, but they'll go back down.
And another question is in terms of research that's milking rattlesnakes. Are we causing problems to the snakes that we are using for research?
Not really, no. Venom is something they can produce throughout their life from birth till the time they die. Most anti-venom and places that milk venom for medical purposes and research, like we were talking about, they in general have a humane way of treating their snakes. I know there was a snake farm in India where I grew up that they just kind of milked the snake, didn't feed it, milk it, kept it kind of, I guess, defensive. They would rile it up all the time to produce it faster in defense and everything, and look, and the snakes would die off. And so that's something that has happened in the past. But in general, snakes are kept in a humane way, like any other medical research animal.
Venom that I collect and stuff, if I'll collect the snake for Loma Linda, they usually give it back to me after they're done with it.
Yeah.
Take it back
Or
where I
release
found
it.
it.
And when it comes to aversion training for dogs, are the snakes stressed by the process? Has any research been done to explore the question?
Well, personally with me, I'm the guy that collects the snakes for them, and I watch the snakes.
We're losing you from the
What's that?
mic. Speak
Oh,
closer.
can't hear me? Okay, I was gonna say that with me, the snakes that I collect, we collect more than we use, so we rotate them out. When they get too hot or they look like they're getting stressed, we'll move that snake back into the shade in a cool spot, and we'll put another one in place. When they've been with the guy that I do it with, after they've been in captivity for a little while, then they get released and new ones are used.
Right, we just rotate new ones in.
Yeah, we don't want to use them too long.
When we've kind of worked with snakes as long as John has, or some of us have, you can easily tell when a snake is getting stressed, overheated, just not acting like it should, and we immediately rotate those out.
And the other reason is
So-
because once the snake becomes acclimated to the dogs, then they stop rattling.
Right.
So you always want to have
Want to
fresh
stress them.
rattlesnakes, bring them in, use them for a little bit, and release them.
I guess the answer is it stresses them a little bit because there's a predator there, but then
Yeah,
but
it
not
does.
anything detrimental to the overall health of the snake.
Yeah, I mean, you have to do it a little bit to get the
You want them
benefit
to
of
rattle.
training
They
the
need to
dog.
rattle, so the dog hears it. But
So yes, they are a little bit stressed in that
Yeah.
sense. We're artificially bringing them into contact with something they might do in nature, but
we do our best to mitigate it.
yeah. So yeah, we have to do that to do the dog, save the
Yeah.
dogs that way. Yeah.
And will snakes use the Liberty Canyon Wildlife Crossing Bridge? Will it affect the genetic diversity?
That's a great question. I don't think we'll know the answer to that, for 50 or 60 years from now. I know that snakes have been found on both sides, very close to the location of where they're going to build it. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't use it. I don't know. I think Sharon might know more than us about the plans of it. I don't know how deep they're building the soil and the ground on the crossing. If it's deep enough, over time there'll be burrows, there'll be rodents in it, and then snakes will move into that as well. At the same time, it's right above a freeway, so there'll be vibration, there'll be noise. It's another myth we didn't cover. Snakes can actually hear. They just can't hear very well. Their ears are internal. They don't have external ears. So I don't know if how much they'll hang around by the freeway, but they'll probably use it. At least some of the diurnal snakes we talked about, the racers and the gopher snakes, will probably use it.
And if people want to help out in their neighborhoods and be kind of the snake person, what do you recommend? Who can they call for training or to help out?
Yeah, so that's actually something
Okay.
I think maybe Sharon or John can talk about more than I, but I think one of the goals of Herp Connection is to set up a training program to help train people through relocation. Is that right, Sharon?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to give out magnets with the numbers on it.
Yeah, if you guys come to the Earth Day that Herp Connection is hosting on the 23rd of April in Chatsworth, some of us will be there. I'm not sure who of us will exactly be there at the time, but some of us will be there, and we'll be happy to talk to anyone who's interested in that and kind of get them set on their way.
We need the help.
Yeah,
I get so many calls from areas I can't get to, and I try to reach out to people I know, but everybody's working and they've got different schedules.
Yeah.
So it's going to take an army of people to really be available at all times during the times that people call for help. So yeah, we can use all the help. So we'll be happy to show people how to do it.
And there's another question. It's our last question is, can snakes hear?
Yes, so snakes can hear. For a long time, the belief was that snakes couldn't hear because they have no ears. It turns out they do have ears. They have the same ear structure that we do or any animal does. Right, they have the ear bone. They can hear all sound is vibrations. It's sound waves. They can absolutely hear. They just can't hear very well. Studies have actually been done that are super fascinating to me. I was reading one yesterday, actually, in captive snakes, where they can identify sounds as sounds related to feeding time as opposed to other things. And they'll come out and kind of crowd their, they'll get into feeding mode, into a feeding response mode when they hear food coming. Whether that's, it's different for everyone. The study that was being done specifically at a university was they would heat up mice with blow dryers and they would hear the vibration. Hear is kind of the wrong word because they're feeling the vibrations of the sound rather than hearing clear sounds like that. Right, sounds are vibrations. But anytime the blow dryer would start running, these snakes would either wake up, they'd come out of their hides, whatever, and be ready. And whereas other vibrations that are similar, they would not. So they can hear.
What's that? Just touch on that a little bit, expanding. So
We can hear.
They can't hear.
can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so just to expand on that, we have 5 senses that we depend on, whereas a snake has what they call a Jacobson organ. And that is their main sensory organ, which is that tongue that you see flicking out all the time.
Even this photo right here.
Yeah, you can see the tongue. So at the end of that tongue, that forked tongue that everybody knows about, picks up 2 samples of air particles, brings it into the Jacobson organ. And in that organ, they can detect what is that. That is their main thing. So it's kind of a taste and smell and scent and all that combined. So the rest of their senses, excuse me, their eyes, so they're not really the important sense. For the underground, eyes are useless. It's the Jacobson organ. It's constantly probing at what's in front of me. What have I got going on 2 sides of me?
Right. What's interesting is preliminary studies show that they'll actually be able to locate prey directionally by, I sense it more on my left fork than my right fork. Right. And kind of goes back in. It's like a chamber on the top of their mouth. They stick their tongue in there and it kind of decodes whatever molecules they brought in with their tongue.
So that's their main deal, not hearing or sight like we do.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to thank you so much, Zeev, John, and Sharon, for this very informative presentation. I want to thank everyone who's attended our webinar tonight, and thank you so much for your support of our webinars. And
Absolutely.
I'll be sending information about the event, as well as the link to the recorded webinar. And I hope everybody has a wonderful evening, and thanks again.
Thank you. Absolutely. And thanks so much for everyone for joining it. And yeah, you can actually find us if you have any further questions on Facebook, Herp Connection. You can send the page a message. You can send me or John a message on Facebook if you have any further questions. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.